Okay, we are continuing on with our wisdom literature books. We already covered Psalms and Proverbs and also a basic intro to wisdom literature. So we're going to jump right into the next 3 books. But you probably, if you haven't watched the video right before this, you should watch that one first because it kind of sets us up for how to deal with wisdom literature. And then the application at the end of this video will go together with both of those. We're going to jump into the book of Job. So a title for Job is, Where is God When I Suffer? Okay. The book of Job is what scholars call a theodicy. A theodicy is literature that seeks to reconcile God's justice to the reality of a world where people experience suffering and evil. So what we have going on with Job was the plight of one man. He's struggling to discover the nature of his suffering. And as you walk through the pages of the book, you see this dramatic portrayal of one man alternating between sinking to the depths of despair and then soaring to the heights of trust. One man saying the same things like, why didn't I just die when I was born? This is all so horrible. And then in other verses where he says things like, I know that my Redeemer lives. And so you see sinking to the depths of despair and soaring to the heights of trust, all while he's trying to figure out the nature of his suffering. And he's struggling to understand God's justice. And as he is, he's accompanied by these 3 friends, these self-appointed counselors who are offering their advice to Job on why he is in fact suffering. One thing that's very important, I mentioned this when we were talking about common misuses of wisdom literature. These 3 friends are not the source of true wisdom. They are the source of conventional human reasoning. And we'll look at that in a moment, but part of the point of this book is to show that conventional human reasoning is not enough. But that what we really need is before God and his infinite wisdom and power, human reasoning is silenced. Okay, so that's one of the major ideas happening in this book. The book of Job answers 2 main questions. One, will man serve God for God alone? And I'll explain that in a minute. And also, where is true wisdom found? So keep those in the back of your mind as you're listening to this, but also if you go through and read the book of Job, keep that in the back of your mind. I do think that the point that the author of Job is trying to make, and why I really love the message of this book so much, because I think he's trying to help us see the wisdom that knowing God is the reason that we live, that this is what life is about. That the overall picture of the book of Job is that God and knowing him is the reason that we live. It's the center of life. And so let me back up and show you where I'm getting that from. Right at the beginning of the book, we see that Satan challenging the relationship of God and man and their mutual enjoyment of each other. It's as if he's coming and saying, Job only serves you for the stuff he gives you, the stuff you give him. And God is saying, no, the life of a believer is about me and knowing me. It's not about the stuff I give them. And so you have this challenge, and then God using Job, giving him the privilege of demonstrating to a watching universe what the life of a believer is all about in the Lord. So the different roles that each character is going to play in this drama as it plays out is you have Satan. He's playing this crucial role of putting God on trial, and he's the basic relationship between God and humans. Is their reciprocal joy in each other only a result of what the creature gets out of it? That's basically what Satan is putting God on trial for. Then you have the 3 friends. They play the role of conventional human wisdom. There's the youth at the end, Elihu. He plays the role of the overconfident youth. And then you have Job playing the central role, seeking an explanation for his suffering because easy answers aren't working anymore. And then Yahweh, or God, plays the ultimate role. He's the initiator of the story, and he is in charge from beginning to end, which is also super important as we're looking at human suffering and what's happening to Job. All right? The brilliance of this book, often it lies in how it seems like human beings are putting God on trial, insisting that he give an explanation for his actions, but really he's putting human beings on trial as to whether or not they will truly trust him and whether he is enough for them. If you notice, no explanations or answers are given to Job anyways. So I do so love the message of this book because it's so challenging, because it's all about our life being about knowing God, not necessarily about the stuff he gives us. He's worthy of our worship, not because of what he gives us, but because of who he is. And that is the message. And when we come to God for who he is, we're proving to a watching universe, to all of creation, that God is enough. And that we're created for mutual enjoyment of each other. So in these first 2 chapters of Job, it's like, as the reader anyways, like a veil is being pulled back and we get to see what's happening in the heavenly realm. Like we see what's happening in Job's life, all the suffering and stuff, but we actually do get to understand what's happening in the heavenly realm. That Satan is putting God and man's relationship on trial and accusing him. But do remember, Job did not get this luxury. We get it as the reader of this story, but he never necessarily got an explanation for his suffering. So one thing that I think is super important is that when he insists on his innocence to his friends, he is telling the truth. Because think about what God says to Satan when Satan puts them on trial. He says, "Have you considered my servant Job? He's blameless and upright." The reason that's important is that Job is not suffering because of sin. That is not the point of his suffering. And that's important because the friends are insisting, like, that's the only reason. You had to have done something wrong. That's the only thing that makes sense in our conventional human reasoning, that God would allow this to happen. But no, that is not why he is suffering. It's not a result of something that he did. And we see that God is in control. And he has bigger purposes. He has something that he's doing that's even bigger than Job's life. It's for the rest of history, for us to learn from, as well as a watching universe. There's something so much bigger than he understands, even though he's suffering. And it had to have been incredibly hard to go through. But God was doing something so much bigger than Job could ever comprehend. So don't miss this idea also of an eternal perspective versus a temporary perspective. Both Satan and Job's wife have this temporary perspective. Basically, they're saying, if God's not going to keep you comfortable here on earth, why serve him at all? Just curse God and die, is what Job's wife says. Because life is about possessions for her, and it's about comfort for her. And that's totally contrary to the wisdom that the book of Job is giving us. The wisdom of seeking God for who he is. Knowing that God is the ultimate. Not plenty of possessions, not comfort. But the thing is, I think all too often, I can admit it myself, I start to look for those things, for comfort and for life and meaning, when that is not the purpose of life. Even if all of those things are stripped away, God is still worthy of worship. And an eternal perspective says, regardless of what happens here on earth, you are worthy of my worship. If all things are stripped away, you're still good, and you are worthy of our worship. If my health, my money, my friends, my freedom, all things are stripped away, you are still God, and you are worthy. And I also want to at least take a look at the attention that God gives Job. Because again, like, you can think, oh, it's so horrible what happened, but I mentioned it just briefly before, the privilege that Job gets, that of all the people on earth, God says, have you considered my servant Job? Because he's going to show the watching universe the point of mankind's relationship with God. What if? I would so hope that I would surrender to God's will, because it would be such a high privilege for him to say, have you considered my servant Eileen? To know that he trusts me enough and our relationship enough to use me as an example. What a privilege, what an honor. It would be, you would have to have an eternal perspective. Life cannot only be about comfort and lack of affliction and things like that, or else you would curse God and die. Do you see the wisdom that the book of Job is helping us lift our eyes a little bit higher and realize life is about so much more than just being comfortable and the things that God gives us. And also, I'd also love at the beginning of the book, Job's response. Everything is taken away. It's stripped away, his possessions, his family, and then his own health. And he says things like, blessed be the name of the Lord. The Lord gives and takes away, and blessed be the name of the Lord. May that be the response in our lives, regardless of what happens. He gives and he takes away. When things are going well, may we say, blessed be the name of the Lord. When everything is going wrong, may we say, blessed be the name of the Lord, because that is what life is about. And it helps raise our vision higher than the temporal and look to eternity. Such beauty, such depth in the book of Job. For God's redemptive plan, I'm not sure exactly how to say this. I think you could say that it points to Jesus because he assumes the role of the ultimate sufferer for our sake, so that we don't have to suffer like that. And he does it so that we can be in relationship with God. And then for his character and nature, God is worthy of our worship. Period. And a timeless truth. God is worthy of our worship, not because of what he gives us, but because of who he is. Please take time to let that rebuke you, let it heal you, let it equip you. And we'll talk a little bit about it at the end of the video and try to make this really applicable into our own lives, okay? But I hope you learn to love the book of Job like I do, and more so. Okay. Next book that we're going to cover is Song of Songs, or Song of Solomon. A title for this book is A Collection of Love Poems. Now, there is discussion amongst scholars, plenty who are far smarter and more well-read than I am, as to who the author of this book is. Is it Solomon or is it somebody else? I'm going to give you my opinion, and then we're going to look at the book, okay? Some people think that right at the beginning, when it says it says how does it say it? Let me say it right. Hold on. The book that is Solomon's, I think is how it says it. Proverbs. Sorry. Here we go. The Song of Songs, which is Solomon's. Okay, so people think, oh, so I guess Solomon wrote it. Well, maybe, but it also could mean the book that is dedicated to Solomon. It could mean his authorship. It could mean concerning Solomon, that he's the subject matter of the book, or it could be Solomonic, which means in the way of the wisdom literature tradition of the time of Solomon. So I've told you wisdom literature was at its height during this Solomonic age, and so it could even just mean that it's kind of this type of wisdom literature. So yes, it's possible that Solomon wrote the book. I personally do not think it is Solomon who wrote the book, because it's so much about the exclusive love between a man and his wife. And the biggest evidence, I think, against Solomon being the author is that he had 300 wives and 700 concubines. And he wasn't he wasn't monogamous in having this exclusive love. And so I just don't think that he's the author. What some scholars think is that it's just a simple country couple who have a beautiful, exclusive love, and they are writing it down in this love poetry, and they're dedicating it to Solomon. Basically, look at this example of what true love is like, and then also we see the wisdom of what true love in marriage looks like. That's my opinion on that. I'm just going to briefly tell you, with a few verse references, I'm going to show you just how the book of Solomon describes what love in marriage could be like. Remember, I told you that wisdom literature can help guide us. It can help us see, here is God's intention for marriage. Here's what marriage could be. Here's how it could sing. Here's how it can be beautiful. And especially those of you that are younger, before you're married and you're listening to this series, then let this be something that holds a high ideal of God's intention for marriage for you. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of go through them a bit quickly. I won't read all the verses, but I'll read through some of them. First of all, love in marriage is exclusive. In 2:16, it's just real basic. It says, my beloved is mine and I am his. She's not saying my beloved is mine and he has 5 others on the side. It is exclusive. So love in marriage is exclusive. Love in marriage is a safe place. All right, you can see this in 1:5-17, 4:7, 7:10, and let me just explain, because this is poetry, and so it could be that as you're looking at this that you're thinking, I don't understand how she's getting all of this. Let me show you something here. In 5 through 7, the woman is talking, and she says, I am very dark, but lovely, O daughters of Jerusalem, like the tents of Kedar, like the curtains of Solomon. Do not gaze at me because I'm dark, because the sun has looked upon me. My mother's sons were angry with me. They made me keeper of the vineyard, but my own vineyard I have not kept. And so you can see she's insecure because her skin is dark. She lives in a culture where that having light skin, not browned by the sun, is highly prized because it means you're wealthy and you don't have to work outside in this agriculture society. And so she's insecure. She feels like her skin isn't beautiful and she doesn't feel pretty. And she's able to express her insecurities to her husband. But then look in 4:7, you see how he creates a safe place for her. This is the man talking, saying, you are altogether beautiful, my love. There's no flaw in you. So she doesn't feel beautiful, but he makes sure that he creates a safe place for her. Okay, so love and marriage is exclusive. It's a safe place. It's affirming. 4:1 through 8 and 2:1 through 2. I love this one. The woman is saying, I am a rose of Sharon, a lily of the valleys, which is basically she's saying, I'm just a common wildflower. There's nothing special about me. And he says, as a lily among brambles, so is my love among the young women. And so you see him just affirming that, okay, fine, if you feel like a plain wildflower, you're like a wildflower among everyone else is a bramble compared to you. And so you see this affirming love and speaking affirmation to his bride. Love in marriage is on guard. Okay, this one might seem a little like, I wouldn't have known that. In 2:15, it says, catch the foxes for us, the little foxes that spoil the vineyards, for our vineyards are in blossom. And remember, we're talking about poetry, and the idea is their love, their romance, and their marriage is like a garden. And so they're saying to their friends, catch for us the little foxes. They're on guard against the things that could destroy or ruin their love. And so you see this picture of like, even the best of love needs to be on guard. You want to guard against things that can destroy your love, okay? Love in marriage is physical. Let's look at there's 7:6 through 9 and 2:4. You see him describing her physical beauty and them being physical together. It's describing their lovemaking. How beautiful and pleasant you are, a loved one, with all your delights. Your stature is like a palm tree. Your breasts are like its clusters. I say, I will climb the palm tree and lay hold of its fruit. Oh, may your breasts be like clusters of the vine, and the scent of your breath like apples, and your mouth like the best wine. And so you see how it's physical. You should be having sex in marriage, and so there's this love poetry is describing that in the Bible, and I think that's important because we're going to learn about it somewhere. Let's go to the source. Let's go to the creator of this. Let's find out what God intended for it instead of going to the toilet bowl of our culture to learn about it. Let's learn about it where God talks about it appropriately. All right, and love in marriage is passionate. This one, I think this one is cute and funny. You can look at chapter 3. You see their passion. And also in chapter 1, verse 9, there's this little verse that says, I compare you, my love, to a mare among Pharaoh's chariots. And maybe some of you women are out there thinking, I don't want to be compared to a horse. But this is actually describing their passion because in this ancient time, a war strategy, you would have Pharaoh with his well-trained stallions ready for war, and they are focused and nothing can take their focus off. But one of the strategies of the opposing army would be to release a mare in heat in front of Pharaoh's chariots. And then all of a sudden, these well-trained stallions can't focus anymore, and they're trying to follow after this mare in heat. And so the husband is saying, like a mare among Pharaoh's chariots is who I compare you to. Basically, when you're around, I can't think, I can't focus. All I want is to be with you. And so you see the passion that they have for one another. I forgot to get the right verse reference for this. I will have it on the PowerPoint. But love in marriage is a friendship. there's a verse in here that says, I am my beloved's and he is my friend, or he is my lover and he is my friend. And so it's important that you have actual friendship to build your marriage on, because the passion will ebb and flow and you need to have some substance. You need to enjoy being together to have an actual friendship to build on through the years, okay? And then love in marriage is welcoming to outsiders' input. This is that same verse 2:15 of catch the little foxes for us. And what I mean by that is that, as you're accountable to other people, you have close friends in your life where you can say, hey, please say the hard things to us. If you notice us drifting apart, if you notice some unhealthy patterns in our marriage, if you see us communicating to each other in a bad way, please be on guard with us. We invite your input. We want help. We want our marriage to be all that God could make it, and all he desires it to be. And so it's inviting other people to come and help be a strength for that. So, oh man, there is so much in this book. It's such a beautiful book of love poetry, and I hope that you, as you read through it, that you do enjoy it. If you're not married, that it gets you excited about marriage, and as well as having God's ideal for marriage. If you are married, that you'll take some time to read it together, and maybe some of it you feel a little sad because you don't experience it this way. It doesn't have to be that way. You can come to the Lord exactly as you are and say, Lord, our marriage actually doesn't look a lot like Song of Solomon, like the book of Song of Solomon, but I want it to be. Will you help us? Will you help us start to apply these things? And I know that it can become richer and sweeter and deeper because of his intention for marriage. Okay. I don't have a really good redemptive plan for this, except that, no, I'm not going to try. I just feel like I'd be forcing it, and I don't want to do that. For God's character and nature, I think we could say he is the creator of sex and marriage. This was his design, all right? And I think that is something important to note. And then, timeless truth. Love in marriage can flourish when God's wisdom is applied. Okay, love in marriage can flourish when God's wisdom is applied. All right, now we're going to try to quickly cover Ecclesiastes, and then we'll be done with our wisdom literature. Ecclesiastes, a title: fear God and keep his commandments. Fear God and keep his commandments. All right. First, I want to say, just to make sure I tell you where I got some of my information, 2 places that I really relied on for this book. How to read the Bible book by book. So I mentioned, I think in the last series, How to Read the Bible for All It's Worth. Same authors wrote a book called How to Read the Bible Book by Book. Fee and Stewart are the name of the authors. And so I highly recommend that book if you're going to go through the whole Bible, because it's fairly easy, small chapters, and it just gives you a little bit of guidance before you jump into a book. So I got some information from them, as well as if you go on YouTube and search up the Bible Project on Ecclesiastes, and honestly, all of their stuff is so good. Anytime you're going to go through a book, I would suggest watching their video, because they do such a good job visually and just kind of capturing the big picture of the book. And Ecclesiastes is one of the more difficult books of the Bible to understand, and they do a really good job at saying it succinctly, and I needed a little help with figuring out how to say it in a way to not confuse everybody, and so I basically used those 2 sources. Traditionally, no other book in the Bible has been so difficult to read, and it's probably because of the somewhat rambling nature, at least to the Western mind, and then some statements that seem to be opposite statements in the same book, and so it kind of can make it hard to understand the point of the book. What is important to note is whoever the teacher is, so he refers to himself as the teacher, he is a character in the book, not the author of the book, okay? That's really important because what you have is the author is introducing this teacher, telling us everything that the teacher said, and then kind of summarizing it there at the end with a point, but he is not the teacher, okay? So I'm going to have this up here on PowerPoint, but basically what you have is we have a framing narrator, the person putting all of this together, in 1:1 and in 12:9 through 12:14. That's when the framing narrator is talking. And all the stuff in the middle are the teacher's thoughts and conclusions, okay? But he's not necessarily the author of the book. So the framing narrator is helping us hear everything the teacher has just said, and then kind of helps us process it and form our own conclusion. So what does the teacher in Ecclesiastes actually say? Basically, he summarizes it at the beginning. He uses this Hebrew word, hevel, everything is hevel. Some translations say vanity, everything is vanity. Some say everything is meaningless or everything is vapor. It's a metaphor that's used 38 times, and it is used to describe life as temporary, fleeting, like a wisp of smoke that you can't quite grab. It appears solid, but when you try to reach for it, you can't grab it. And so it's kind of depressing. So why focus on this? And I think the author is targeting all the ways that we try to find meaning and life and purpose for our lives apart from God. And he lets the teacher deconstruct all these different ways that we do this. But the purpose is to show us that life without God is meaningless, that the whole point of life is to know God. He's trying to help. Right at the end, he explains that his words are like a goad poking us. It's uncomfortable, but it's kind of poking us, and it's causing us to think, and it's moving us in the direction of God. Because the whole point is that the need for the fear of God, that all of life is about Him. Let's look right at the very end. What after all is said and done? Fear God and keep His commandments. That's kind of the basic message of the book. But he uses this teacher to kind of stir us up a little bit and get uncomfortable and look at the different ways that we try to look for life in other things, instead of taking life as it is, as God has given it to us, and trusting Him, recognizing that as we fear Him and keep His commandments, that is the way to live. Okay. I'm gonna just go right into character and nature. I don't know how to say it in just one word. I'm gonna say it in a sentence. That God is creator. His ways are not our ways, and He is the source and the giver of life. And then with a timeless truth, don't miss the overall point of life's emptiness without the fear of God. So I so hope this helps. I know that this book particularly is a bit confusing, and I did my best to simplify it. If you didn't find this overly helpful, please watch the Bible Project and what they do on YouTube, because it's really good, and it helps visually explain the message of the book. So I hope that helps you somewhat. Now we'll have a little bit of time of thinking through the wisdom books and some real life application here in a moment. Okay, we're into the application part of this session. We want to take all of these truths, we want to work them in and just figure out, what does this mean in our lives? It's great that we're learning so much about the Bible, but it needs to mean something in our lives. It needs to change our lives. All right, so I'm going to take the truth from the book of Job. And what we said as a timeless truth is that God is worthy of our worship, not because of what He gives us, but because of who He is. How does this rebuke me? Oh man, does this ever rebuke me? How many times, countless times a day, do I treat God like He's there, like a kind old grandpa in the sky who's just supposed to meet my every whim, my every desire for comfort, every little thing I want, and then when He doesn't, I act like a spoiled brat and I don't trust Him. I mean, this absolutely rebukes me. So often I treat Him like He is there to give me what I want. And I just, it's ugly and I don't like seeing it, but it's good. It's so good to see it. I need to be rebuked. I don't want to treat the Lord like that. He is worthy of my worship because of who He is, not because of what He gives me. And please, every time we talk about this rebuking step, it is such a necessary step in our life, and it's good and it's beautiful, because by being rebuked like that, I'm brought back to the Lord, and then I'm not treating Him in this awful way. I'm not condemned. Instead, I'm set free by realizing, oh Lord, what am I doing? And I come to Him and I remember once again that He is the Lord. And that's how this heals me, because as I'm reminded, wait a second,
God is not there just to give me what I want. I don't worship him because he does good things for me. I worship him because he is God. And that absolutely brings healing, because often what happens is I get so self-centered. I get focused on myself. I get focused on what I have and don't have. Maybe even it's real suffering. I don't want to discount real suffering. The truth still stands. When I'm completely focused on myself, there's no peace. But when I remember this truth and I start to tell myself, God, you are good. God, you are merciful. God, you are holy. God, you are God and I am not. And let me point out, these are all the truths that we're starting to pull out together in this study as we look at his character and nature. You have, especially by the end of this, you're going to have all kinds of tools in your tool belt as far as what you know to be true about God. Well, you declare those things to yourself, and then the healing starts to happen. Peace starts to flood your heart. Surrender, humility, tenderness, thankfulness. And so the healing comes when you remember that God is God, and we worship him because he's God. Just like Job encounters God right at the end. Think about it. When he encounters God, when God shows up and he talks to him, he doesn't necessarily tell him why he was suffering, but he says, here is who I am. And then Job repents in dust and ashes because he has encountered God. And that's what I want for my life. That's what I want for your life, to encounter the true God, not a God we create in our mind or make up. That's not a God that can fit inside our mind, is not big enough to worship. So may we be healed by this truth that we see in the book of Job. And now we're equipped. Now we've got what we need. When we start treating God like he's there to give us what we want, make us comfortable, make our lives happy, we can stop ourselves. We can say, no, God is worthy of our worship because he is God. Come what may, the mountains crumble into the sea, the oceans swallow up the land. We're going to worship him because he is God and he's worthy of it. And that also brings healing and equipping when you think about, we talked about the privilege it was for God to say, have you considered my servant Job? If I treat God like he is God and he's worthy of worship, then I have the high honor of glorifying him to a watching universe and revealing to a watching universe that this is what the relationship of a believer and God is all about. It's not about what he gives us. It's about who he is and worshiping him and loving him in a trusting relationship. So please take this truth, work it in this week, let it rebuke you. Look for ways in your life where you are treating him like he's there just to give you things as opposed to worshiping him for who he is. And I think you're going to start to develop a humility, a softness towards the Lord, a tenderness, a joy that you've never known before if you really lean into these truths. So please, take this seriously, work it out in your community, in your own lives, and share with each other what you're getting out of this.